You have mentioned contract.
Policies.
Into
Contract, yes.
Number two, you've mentioned policies as number three. I think there are about 8 classes of information that you can actually access from the government. But maybe I will bring your colleague in, Mohammed Sani Kasim. Are you here with us, Mohammed?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. So could you go ahead and also share with us the other classes of information? Just stay with the classes of information. We shall be able to talk about them and all that stuff as we move on. So we have identified 3. If you can go ahead and share other classes of information that people can access from government agencies, we appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. So one of the very cardinal and another perspective to the information is also regarding plans that do not interfere with either intellectual property or conversations regarding client rights. For example, you have the right to access information, as my colleague has rightly mentioned, as it comes to policy. It's also, you have also the right to assess plans. What are the plans for the government, including, most of the times now we have a lot of constructions going on, and part of the criteria is for you to ensure that there is an environmental impact assessment, which a lot of people don't do, by the way. But you have the right to also hold the government accountable to request for that information before the start of the work itself. So you're able to do that. Another very important thing is you also have the right to access information that are of the past, except if they have already been archived. You want to know how Nigeria was amalgamated. You want to know how your village was formed. You want to know how your town planning was done. So far, it has not been archived in the National Archive. You also have the right to access that very information. Of course, there are other exceptions, but the very key thing about it, and as it regards it, any public information, you also have the right to access it. So it will have some little exceptions, which the Act was able to mention, especially as regards to national security, client right for lawyers, health, and other key things that are personal data. But you actually have the right to access every information. And as my colleague rightly mentioned, whether it's public or it's being held by another party, which could be a private company, but with taxpayers' money. For example, in 2015, when Stella Odua was the minister, there was an instance where she was given a car. And then I remember media rights agenda then reached to her to say, how much did you bought this car? And then media and then Stella Odua was like, no, we're not going to give you the information. But then Kocharis was the contractor who supplied the car. And then media rights then sued Kocharis, first wrote to Kocharis to say, can I have the detail of how much was this car bought? Which Kocharis felt in their own wisdom that they are private want to share this information. So media rights agenda dragged Kocharis to a high court, and then the high court gave the verdict to say Kocharis must supply that information up to appeal court. And we've seen that recently. So even if it's a government, it's a private entity that's holding or doing an activity, but with the taxpayers' money, actually have the right to access that information. So very generous the Act was, except for the exceptions, is even to mention that clause, every relevant information. So far you feel that information is of public essence, especially where taxpayers' money is used directly or indirectly, partly or in full, you actually have the right to access that information. I hope that provides a better window to that.
Okay, thank you so much. Here, we still have quite other areas that citizens can access information. They have a right to access information from the government. I think, Chimeze, do you want to shed more light on some of these areas that citizens can also access information? We just want participants to be able to understand what they can ask for and what they cannot ask for from the government under this law. Chimeze, please.
All right. So, like I rightly mentioned, what information you could get from your government. Number one is your budget, your state government budget, and thankfully, you don't even most times need to even write to get this budget from your government. most times you can find it on your government website. For instance, or you can go to openstate.ng. You could find all state government budgets there, clearly stated there.
Sorry that I'm cutting you off. I'm just trying to be a little bit more systematic. I know we have talked about budget. You can access it. You can access money, finance, policies, records, plans. That I'm looking for more specific areas more. So so we can. I know we have more time to discuss how we can do this and all that. But at this point, we're still trying to outline the various areas that people can. Can you think about other areas too, or have we exhausted the areas, the kinds of information that people can ask for?
Okay, so like I already mentioned, even like Mohammed mentioned, any information you feel is of public use, it could be procurement or contract details. It could even be organizational information. You could ask for organizational information. You could ask for, so I'm trying to check the list. You could ask for even audit and compliance reports of organizations, right? You can ask for financial reports of public institution. You can ask for records in any format. So it's not really specific, as long as, so there's exceptions to the law, like we mentioned, to the act, like we mentioned, exception if it's an information that would contravene the security of the country, or even some person's personal records. So you can ask for one's medical details or their personal privacy information. So those are the kind of exception. But any public information, any information domiciled with any public institution, you have the rights to write. So it's now left for you as an individual to be specific. I am looking for social information. That's why I mentioned you have to know which ministry or agency that this information is domiciled with, so that you don't write to an agency that is not having that information in the archive, right? So you have to be specific, know the ministry, agency, and be specific with your request before you could get whatever information you're requesting for.
Okay, thank you so much. Just so for the interest of our listeners, Freedom of Information Act allows you to access certain kinds of information from the government. And our speakers here have outlined some of them. And I'm just going to recap it for you. There are about 8 areas or 8 kinds of information that you can access under the Freedom of Information law. The first area is information about budget, financial, the use of money, and government expenditure, whether there is money for contracts, whether it's money put in the budget and all that stuff. That is an information any Nigerian citizen can actually walk up to any government agency and ask for it. There's also information about government plans, as mentioned by Mohammed Kasim. If government wants to execute a project or government wants to do something in your community, there's usually a plan for it. So you can ask about that plan so you can make a contribution to what they are going to do. Doesn't mean they want to do a road that's going to cut across your kitchen and you don't know about it. That could be a problem. So you can have access to that. And there is information about policies, government policies. What are the policies that government put in place? Many Nigerians do not know about government policies. They just wake up and the policies will just apply to them. So people have a right to go and ask about policies and understand them. Sometimes when policies are made, we only get headlines, sound bites on the television, on the newspaper, but we don't have the details. And sometimes the details can apply to you. So you can go to the government and ask for that information. You can also ask for information about the names of government employees, their salaries. So there's nothing that says you cannot go to the Ministry of Labor and ask for the salary of the Director of Labor. How much is he earning at that place? You can ask of information about their dates. So I think Chimeze was talking about organizational information. So this specific information relate to the organization. You can actually find out the date of hire of somebody, the title, the position. of somebody, a government official. These things are not considered private information. They are considered public information. You can, the name of every official and the final records of voting, for example, in all proceedings of the institution, we can always ask for all these things. You can ask about receipts or expenditure of public or other funds of the institution. So, I mean, there are exemptions, to the law, and we're going to be looking at them just right now. I don't know whether Ruth is here already, or is she still struggling with network? Blessing, is Ruth here?
Yes, Ruth is here. She's here with us.
Okay, Ruth, can you introduce yourself and jump in and probably tell us a little bit about exemptions? What information, what kinds of information the individual should not or cannot get from the government. Ruth, please.
Exemption.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, and can we see your face?
Apologies for joining in. Oh my goodness. You can, but I'm also skeptical about the sound in my background. Please apologize. I apologize for that.
Do you ask
Hello.
people around you to be a bit quiet? It's a little bit of noise around there.
I'm also trying to save my bandwidth. So yes. Thank you. I'm going to go.
Can you introduce yourself a bit? We had earlier introduced you when you were not around, so that those you're talking to.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I think.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Specialist in Abuja, right?
Yes. My name is Ruth Okafor, and I currently work as a government relations and policy specialist at One Acre Fund. But prior to this, I have been working in the civic space for about 5 years around issues of civic governance, civic education, gender and policy. So those are key areas where I have been able to work around in Nigeria, around several states in Nigeria. So that's briefly about me and what I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've been having a conversation around the understanding of freedom of information. What kinds of information can citizens access from the government, and what kinds of information that citizens cannot access from the government? We have already outlined about 8 areas, 8 kinds of information that citizens can access. We are asking you to now, could you please tell us the kinds of information that citizens cannot access from the government? Ruth.
Yeah, for the Freedom of Information Act, I believe most people on this call, the speakers specifically have actually highlighted a lot of this for areas that citizens can access information using the FOI Act. One area that citizens cannot access information is specifically the security. There are different dynamics to that as to why citizens are not able to use the FOI Act to gain access to issues bordering around security from the budgeting. When Chimeze mentioned, he said something around you can access areas of budgeting, but every budgeting around the security, you can't use the Freedom of Information Act to access it. These are because of, like he said, security concerns and not and ensuring that a level of secrecy is left to protect the security personnel and those in authority. That's specifically an area where where you cannot use the FOI Act to access information?
Okay, yeah. I thank you so much in the area of security. I know that is a very controversial area because security is also very large and wide, and I think there are clauses here and there, but I'm sure that whenever one is ready for such information, the law will clarify even more. But there are also quite a few more areas that the citizen cannot access information. Chimeze, can you come in here and shed light a little bit on one or two more areas, if you know?
Yeah, so just like Ruth rightly mentioned, so one of the number one area you can't access information is on national security, which is under section 11 in the Freedom of Information Act. Another area you can't access information is personal privacy. So personal data such as people's medical records, their private correspondence, you don't have access to such information. Number three, you have law enforcement. So and let's say an investigation is ongoing, probably for an arrest or any particular issue, you can't access such information from the police because it will jeopardize the law enforcement of that particular case that is ongoing. Number four, we have commercial confidentiality. So they are what we call trade secrets and sensitive business information. So which, if it goes out to the public, might undermine some kind of businesses. So some commercial information, you may not be able to access them. Number five, we have legal privileges. So the information that are protected by the Attorney General of the country. So in his office, in his power, the Constitution gave him a particular discretion. So there's information that Attorney General could decide not to grant people access to, and you can find that under Section 16 of the Freedom of Information Act. But then, of course, there can always be exemption of some of these information you cannot access from the government. And just like you mentioned, sometimes our public officials, they've made it they usually leverage on this to not release information. You tell them some information that could be of public interest, they tell you it will jeopardize public security. So these five issues are mentioned: national security under Section 11, private information privacy under Section 14, law enforcement under Section 12 of the FOI law, commercial confidentiality under Section 15, and legal privileges under Section 16.
Fantastic. Chimeze, you have really handled this topic very well. Fantastic. There's nothing to add to it. So we'll jump over to another aspect. And so you've all heard him. So there are areas you can't get information. So don't go asking for that kind of information from the government. Thank you so much, Chimeze. You did a great job here. Now, let's talk about, we talk about government as government. And which government agencies can we get information from? And which entities are considered, are bound by this law, whether they are government or they are not government. And probably we can shed more light on the rationale why these entities are included. The law stipulates, several kinds of entities. Of course, we have the latest ruling from the Supreme Court regarding the law and the state government agencies. So, Mohammed Kasim, can you outline for us, identify, pretty much in the style that Chimeze just used to answer this last question, the entities, both government and non-government entities that are bound by this law? Mohammed.
Mohammed, yes. Yes. Thank you so much. So to start with, it's actually every public institution. And what we mean by public institution includes either a ministry, a department, an agency, a bureau, even if it's just a quasi form of government. It also includes committees. Hello, Bobby. Sorry, It also includes committees. It also includes private sector or whichever body, including an NGO or any other third party, which is being run partly or in full by a public fund, or it's serving a public interest. Most of the times we tend to put the fund first, but at times it could also be the interest. For example, you have a trustee, let's say an NGO, that said, oh, government, we're willing to take up this hospital for us to provide a certain amount of service. To say a certain amount of service. So you actually can access that information from that. And with the very long time to state and local government, they tell you, oh, well, we have not domesticated the FOI. And I remember in some years we've been able to support some states to draft some draft laws, and then most of the time they just don't want it. But now with the Supreme Court, that it's applicable to everyone.
I think we're having a network issue here. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if it's from me or from the other end.
From your end, but we can hear you now. So go ahead and continue listing out for us.
Entities. Okay. So I was earlier mentioning that it's with all public MDAs, including now with the new Supreme Court judgment, including the states and local governments, including fully funded public, any institution, whether partly funded, even quasi-governments, so far there is public interest to that matter. It even includes concessions. It includes companies that are, for example, they are very familiar with a lot of infrastructure that are coming in. You see a lot of key infrastructures that have already been concessioned by the federal government. You actually have the right to access information to them from them because they're serving public interest, even though they are not being run by public funds. So that is it, really.
Okay, so pretty much anything that has any entity that has anything government in it, then people can access that information from that entity, including federal agencies, parastatals offices, state agencies and parastatals, local government agencies and parastatals, as well as private companies that are probably receiving public money or government money to do their work. So people can go to them and ask information.
Yes.
And not just about money, but also people that are doing things in public interest, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ruth, do you have anything to add here to what Mohammed has already said about entities that are bound by this law?
Well, I believe Mohammed has done justice to that, but I would just include the court. Certain court proceedings, you can gain access to the information. I believe the 2023 general election should have shown us that you could gain access to court proceedings using the FOI Act if you want to understand how a judgment was given or delivered. So that's just my addition to this. I believe all of it has been highlighted by Mohammed.
Fantastic, thank you. And Chimeze, is there anything left to be said around entities that are bound by this law?
No, I believe Ruth and Mohammed has highlighted all of them.
Fantastic. So, participants, you understand which entities to go to now. If you need information, and I think Mohammed earlier on gave us a case study with Odua's vehicle, and when people wanted information about it, she refused to give it. And, the citizen that wanted that information went to Coscharis and sued Coscharis, and the court compelled Coscharis to release that information, because Charis is not a public entity, it's a private business, but because it received government money for the sale of the vehicle, then the Freedom of Information Act applied. So if you are trying to get that information from government agency and they're giving you a heck of problem, then go to the private company that work with them or whoever they gave the contract to or whatever. I think you should be able to, get that information. Now, we have understood, what kinds of information that citizens can access. We have also understood the public entities or the entities, both public and private entities that are bound by this law. I want us to go into an aspect of the law that is also very interesting. Now, must this information be made public when be released when people ask for them, or does the law require these entities to make this information public, whether somebody is asking for them or not asking for them? Mohammed, I will go with you first here.
So the law was very particular and have encouraged something we call proactive disclosure. And with proactive disclosure is to say, you already have an idea about what people will want to always see. Ensure that those informations are already disclosed. So when they are already proactively disclosed, it just means that you already have them in the public space, where it's going to even reduce the essence and the burden for you to even keep replying to the FOIs. For example, within the last 10 years, before now, hardly will you see a budget, especially state budget. At times when you get the state budget, you go to the government printers, you give someone know where the budget is.
Yeah, I think, Mohammed, you are having some network issues there.
Oh, the video.
Okay, well, I think Mohammed is having some network issues there. Okay, while we wait for him to come back, Ruth, can you, take it up from where he stopped?
Oh, okay. Based on what Mohammed was mentioning, the fact is the law clearly states that all of these public records should be made public because they are public in the very first place. The public ought to come to your website or to your domain and literally have access to these documents. For instance, we can see that you would go to NMPC and you are looking for NMPC website and you're looking for what its revenue is like. Those are supposed to be open source. They ought to be open to the general public, so citizens would know how much is the expense and what NMPC is gaining. Those are supposed to be open access information for every citizen. But the truth is, in Nigeria, there is that dynamics where such things are not adhered to. There could be, we could say that they are as a result of lack of technical know-how, but the world is changing, rapidly changing, and there is a need for most of this information to be made public. Like Mohammed said, we did follow up in some local governments. In some, if you look across local governments, very few local governments would you see that have published what their budget looks like, even with the current assets. Revenue are not known. All of these are just hidden, literally, but they ought to be citizens' documents per se. Citizens should be able to go on their websites or their domains to access this information. What the law clearly states is make it open. Things that should be hidden, there are things that are not even supposed to be hidden, to be honest, such as the budgets. They're supposed to be open source, except we're looking for maybe more information, then we start using the FOI. Sometimes it feels ridiculous that we're using the FOI to request for the budgets when there are other things that we should actually be using the FOI to request for. I would go on to maybe finding out who the contractor is, the amount of fund that was released, or the amount of money spent. Those little details are some of the things that we can say, oh, we're utilizing the FOI to eventually get those information. But when we're talking about states, there are things known as performance budgets. There are things known as I'm trying to think of all the names they use, the quarterly reports for budgets. Those information ought to be regularly updated so citizens can actually have access to them. And this is one of the reasons why we make use of the FOI. But if they adhere to the law, truth is this document ought to be openly sourced for every citizen to have access to.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ruth. I mean, this conversation can, go on for a long time, especially if we now start going down into the specifics of this, and it's interesting and it's important that we have this conversation, especially, for example, now you're saying that the law requires, public entities or private entities that are using government funds or something to disclose this information. So let's use the Coscharis case as an example. And so was Coscharis then required by the law to publish the amount of money that they sold the car to Stella at that time? And would that be the case for every private entity, for example, that has received government money for anything? So let's say you are the person procuring, let's say, computers for the Ministry of Education. Are you saying that the government requires you to publish that information, even though you're a public-private entity, in your website? Or are you saying that the government requires the Ministry of Education to publish that information of how much they bought the computers and which company that they bought it from? So which, or are you saying that both of them are required to do that? Whether somebody is asking for that or there's nobody asking for that? Chimeze, maybe you can jump in here.
All right, so yes, so like Mohammed was saying, the law requires these institutions to make this information readily available, right? So the word readily available, it must not be after one has applied, writing letters. How about someone who probably is an illiterate, did not go to school, doesn't know how to read and write? How can they access this information? So the law made it that anybody, any public institution, or even private institutions that are doing projects for the government needs to make this information readily available. So the law states that it applies for both the government and private institutions. They should make this information available probably on their website, or maybe even when you go to the office to ask for it. But just like we mentioned, most of these things exist on paper, but when you go to these institutions' websites, you don't really find this information readily available. You have to apply for it. In fact, you even have some that you might have to go to court and compare them, get courts to compare them, just like the issue of Stella that was mentioned, right? You have to get the court to compare them, but the law states that this information should be readily available by these institutions.
Okay, so thank you so much. I think that, like I said, we can probably have another conversation around to the extent a private institution might be able to reveal information. Mohammed, you're back. Thank you so much.
Sorry, the network just kept fluctuating, and at some point, some people would just keep calling. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I know, we understand the Nigerian situation. But before you left, and I think you seem to have, a stronger grip around the issue of what does the law require? Like, okay, so the law requires that the public institutions publish information, even without citizens asking for it. The record should be available. But we're also asking private entities that have something to do with the government, whether they are also required. So let me give you an example. Your uncle that sells, let me say, for example, notebooks, exercise bookshop. He has a bookshop, and then he supplies books to primary schools in his local government. Probably he's not even a very well organized business. He just has a shop. And so to what extent does the law also require such a person to publish the amount of money that he received from the government to supply those books? And to what extent does the government require the Ministry of Education to publish? So I'm trying to understand who has the burden of publication here. Is it the government that has given out that contract? And does the government have, is the government required to also mention names of the company, whatever, especially in this time and age where we have security issues? So who has that burden of publishing all these records? And we're using only finance here. There could be other information about the government. If you can, in a minute, quickly clarify this, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah. So the law was not very specific to say the private sector must publish. However, we can only rely on a very good corporate governance code for the private sector to always publish, for example, the audited accounts and a lot of other key finances. But the burden of publication is actually with the government. And for example, there are a lot of reforms, especially as regards to public procurement and annual reports that you see some agencies, some emphasis on some, few publish. For example, if you have an OCDS data, it gives you the detail, the company, even the name of the director and the phone number of the director of the beneficiary of that very transaction. So you have the government publishing, or is supposed to publish in some very key instances. But the burden of publication is actually at the government. However, we can always rely back to say a very good corporate governance code will always ensure that the companies are able to publish and declare where they have mixed interests as it matters to that. That is one. Another very important thing that we've also seen as time goes on is regarding security. For example, just in April, I was able to facilitate a lot of a training for over 300 desk officers and state counsel of the Office of the Honorable Attorney General. And part of the conversation that we had is regarding security. And this happened with me, particularly in 2017. So we went into community to tell people this school is being built for 11 million, and therefore people should hold the contractor and the government accountable. Just a few months after, a site manager was kidnapped. When the trace happened and a lot of things happened, it became that where the information leaked was, when people were seeing them working, nobody really thought about how much was the cost. But when we went to that community town hall to disclose that this building of the school was for 11 million, just a few months after, the site manager was kidnapped. And when the site manager was kidnapped, what the people were asking for is they need that 11 million that the government has already given them to publish the school. So you could see how at times what you have done in very good conscience can actually lead to other non-intended negative consequences. And it actually now borders back to how we engage communities and how we engage in the conversations that we have. So at times what it now did to us then was it forced us to now become more selective and more careful with the kind of information that we disclose, even though that is not what it's supposed to be. So we have a lot of things that are coming up, a lot of contemporary issues that are coming up. And as I've earlier mentioned, the conversation we had in April with a lot of government officials is for us to now see what are the challenges, especially with the recent Supreme Court judgment, so that we can be able to design a minimum standard, because we now have a lot of local governments and state governments now rushing to domesticate a law of FOI. Remember, 14 years ago, we've been pushing them to do that, which they failed to do. But now they just want to rush because of the Supreme Court judgment. But now we're trying to put in a minimum standard regulation that is going to entail that. This and a lot of other contemporary issues are things that we really have to look vis-a-vis. And in law, we call them de jure and de facto of how things go.
Thank you so much. I mean, you have done a good job on this, Mohammed, and I'm really very fascinated about the example you gave regarding going to a community and telling them that the school was being built with about 11 million. And so, yeah, even the law says that information that could jeopardize the security and safety of people should not be released. So I guess maybe that would have to, especially given the security situation in our country, but that also gives the government the advantage to say, oh, if we release how much money we have given, then they might go and kidnap the contractor. And the contractor might say, I can't release this because my life is at stake. And I believe if they go to court, I'm sure they're going to definitely win. They'll probably cite your case of the 11 million, and every reasonable judge will be like, I don't want to be part of what would lead to somebody's kidnap. But if we have good security in the country, I don't think that would be an issue. So which means that for the Freedom of Information Act to work well, the government still has to do some enabling environment work. For example, in some civilized nation, even if they write that you got a contract for $1 million from the government, nobody is going to come and kidnap you. Nobody is going to come and kill you or rob you. So we must then understand that for the Freedom of Information Act to work well, then there are certain things that must be in place in government for these things to work very well. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you so much, Chimezie and Ruth, for your insights on institutions that are required to publish information for the public. But still on that, I think when Ruth was talking, and I have to go back to Ruth again, she mentioned that, oh, this information could be published on the website, should be published on the website. She kept making a reference to your website. But I was wondering whether the law has a requirement for means of publication. So if a local government does not have a website, so what is the means of communication? Is it that it should be written somewhere and kept in their file? Or are they required to always have a website where they can publish this? Because let's not forget that not all organizations, not all companies have websites. And I'm not sure whether having a website has come to be required as standard. So when you talk about publishing this, where is there a particular platform or a particular means required by the law for these public institutions or private institutions that are working for the government to publish this, so that these institutions would know that maybe they are required to publish this in a newspaper, in their on their website, or document it somewhere and keep it in their office. Is the law specific about this, or are people supposed to use their common sense? Ruth, can you jump in here if you're still here with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thank you so much for the question. All right, so I believe the law doesn't specifically give you a particular means or a channel for publication, but what it does is it did mention areas where diverse means where this publication can be done. One is the official gazettes. Most institutions have official gazettes where they can publish from memos to different details that the institution requires to be out there. Then they have websites. Most government agencies have websites. I know that very few local government agencies, most local governments barely have websites. And this is why a gazette or an official publication document would actually suffice in such instance. And I know that, so,
yeah, well,
all right. Then there is also media. There is also print media. It's because this can serve as an easier means of publication. Once this information is available and have been properly documented by the agency, they can utilize the print media, specifically and electronic media, to put this information out there. Once most electronic and current print media today would be able to house this information on their own website, and it makes it easier for citizens to easily assess where such agencies lack an official website. Then there are notice boards, and usually which you have to go to the office of, particularly let's use the local government, for instance, the notice boards where this information can be posted. But I would stick to the official websites. It's great. It would be great that most agencies have this website, but in places where such websites are non-existent, print media should suffice, or their official gazette.
Okay, so are you saying that every agency in the government has a gazette, or are you talking about the entire state gazette, or the gazette of an entire state? We just want to be clear about it so that citizens would know where to go look for information when they need it.
Yes, local governments ought to have gazettes. That's what it is stated in law. They ought to have gazettes. But when, in such instance, when they are not existent, because before now, what have been practiced in Nigeria is the fact that the state government oversees most of these expenditures, most of the income as a whole. So,
but sorry to cut you off. It's not only the state governments that the local governments are required to publish in, ministries and parastatals. So, for example, Ministry for Education, Ministry for Youth, they are also government agencies. Do they have their own gazettes, or they use the state gazette?
For state agencies, state agencies use the government gazette. There are certain commissions that are buoyant enough and are properly equipped to have their own gazettes. I know that of Adamawa State. You can go online and you can see that each of these agencies or commissions have their own websites that are fully functional with information. For instance, education, that of Adamawa State has their own website. You can have access to the budget, what was spent and all. There are certain states that have this, but there are still states that are yet to have it. And in such instance, most of those states that lack such usually make use of the state gazette.
Okay, so thank you so much, Chimeze. I don't know whether you want to drop in here. What kind of information, what means of information in the community, or what platforms are required by law? I'm not talking about it would be nice for it to be on the website. I'm talking about what the law requires.
Yeah, so looking at the law, section 2, subsection 4 of the Freedom of Information Act, I would like to read it clearly. Section 2 of subsection 4, it says, a public institution shall ensure that information referred in this section is widely disseminated and made readily available to members of the public through various means, including print, electronic, and online sources, and at the offices of such institution. So that's section 2, subsection 4. So it mentions specifically print, electronic, and online sources, and at the offices of such public institutions. So the law was clear on that.
Okay, so they can use the section says widely distributed institutions shall ensure that information widely distributed and made readily available to members of the public through various means, including print, electronic, and online sources, and at the offices of such public information. So it doesn't even say all, so it means that they should use all these means of information. So, and that is very interesting, and thank you so much for taking us specifically to that law, Chimeze. That really is very helpful, because then we then know what to demand from the government, which means almost all government parastatals or agencies should have all this information online, and should also be able to put them in print or something like that, even though the print does not actually say whether it's newspaper or something. But nonetheless, the information is very clear. And thank you so much about that. I don't know, Mohammed, would want to offer some interpretation around this so that we can move on to something else, which will be the final conversation. Mohammed, are you there? Mohammed? Okay, so it looks like he's not there. So thank you so much for the clarification on the means of presenting this information to the public. Mohammed, are you back?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
You want to offer a very quick, insight on the means of presenting this information to the public by law?
Yes. So by law, it's actually just to have access to the information in a form that is understandable. And something the act, was very generous about is even to mention that you can actually pay for duplication fee, a reasonable amount for duplication, where you feel you want the information either in hard copy or in soft copy. But it's now more of a burden of kindness and responsibility also to citizens by the various MDAs to ensure that the information that I'm going to be requesting is actually in a form that makes sense. And gladly, for example, that there's something as part of the exceptions where you can request for an information and then some part of the information maybe cannot be disclosed. This act still went ahead to say you can do that, but you can just retard or just block out where you feel the information should not actually be disclosed. So it can actually be in every form. So far, it's actually in the form that makes sense, in a presentable form. But the more of the burden of analysis and sorting out is now on the responsibility of the person who has requested information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are coming to the close of this discussion, and I have one or two more things for us to quickly look at. We didn't start exactly at 1 o'clock. I think we started like a few minutes after 1. So this conversation was supposed to last for 1 hour. So now tell me about the process of obtaining this information. Yes, you have all agreed that the public agencies and entities, as well as private entities that have something to do with the government, should be more proactive in publishing these things, either on their website, in their gazettes, print media, online, or something like that, so that people can just always go there and look for them. But when people can't see this information that this information have not been made public, and somebody wants to specifically ask for an information, what is the process? How can somebody then ask for the information? So for example, if I want to go to the Ministry of Education and ask for the name of a particular employee, the day she was hired, her salary rate and everything, what is the process I should follow? Is there a standard process established by the law that everybody must follow? Ruth, can we go to you, please, for 1 minute? And have you asked for one before? And what process did you follow? Ruth, are you there? Okay.
I got kicked out. Please, can I get the question again?
The question is that is there a standard process for somebody to request for this information from the people? Like I said, we have already said that the information should be public, which means somebody could go to the website of an agency and get it, or go to their gazette, or walk in and look at the print media and get it. But if somebody wants something specific and maybe these things are not available on these platforms, is there a process stipulated by the law that the person can use to ask for that specific information? And I have given an example, like if I want to go to Ministry of Education, I want to know the name, the date of hire, the position and salary of a particular employee. What process should I follow? Is there a standard process established by law? Have you asked for some information before, and what process did you follow? Ruth.
It's quite a very clear standard. Most times it's to write to the agency or the departments that you are requesting this information from. Key things that are very important to note when writing is, first, there must be clarity as to who you're writing to. That's the agency. What details do you need? That needs to be as clear as possible. Like you mentioned, if you want the name, maybe a contractor, let's use that as an example. You want to, you're looking for, there is a contract awarded to a contractor or someone through an agency, now you know what the agency is on the budget, and you're looking, you know the amount that was awarded, you know probably the location and all those details. For instance, on the budget, there are certain details that you find out, the budget number for that, maybe for the contract or for the infrastructure you're requesting. In that instance, you need to know, like I said, the who, the what, and the when. The when is it from 2023 or 2024 budget? So that needs to be very specific. Once you have that, the next is writing out a very concise FOI letter that looks at, first, you properly addressed to the agency that you're writing to. Some of these agencies have an FOI deck, while some do not. So it's very important that maybe you refer directly to the agency and do a CC for the decks, so that it can be properly forwarded to the right persons who would actually respond to the information that is needed. Then you are on the letter, like I said, as regards to the details you want to start writing out the details. One thing that you must get clearly is quoting the FOI Act itself. And that can go in a form of according to, or I wanted to use a sample. That would really help us, because sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, talking about citizens, I mean, they have to go and pull out the FOI law and quote it, or including people that are well lettered. I mean, that's crazy. But anyway, Chimeze, have you asked for information from a government entity?
So I was trying to say something.
Okay, go ahead. Finish.
Go ahead. All right. So what I was trying to point out is you're citing the FOI Act 2011, sorry, and it has to go in, so requesting the detail. Maybe you're requesting for the contractor under the FOI Act of 2020 or 2011. So that is clear that, oh, you're invoking the FOI Act. I could show a sample, but that is basically what needs to, these details is basically what needs to be in that letter. And it just has to be clear, not so much, just concise and brief as possible. Then when submitting to the agency, you need to ensure that you have an acknowledgement copy for follow-ups, because most times, this is Nigeria, there is a need to have a consistent follow-up to get your feedback. And there's certain times, although it is stipulated that 7 days, the Act stipulates 7 days, you need to be able to also put that in the letter that, oh, it stipulates 7 days. Sometimes necessary, sometimes not necessary, but just to put it out there so they know that you are actually referring to the FOI Act.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth. And I think also you brought in a question I was going to ask about the period of time that a government agency or parastatal must respond to you. Chimeze, have you asked for any information from any government agency, and how did it go? Can you share your experience?
Yes, so I reside in Imo State, Imo State, and luckily for Imo State, before the Supreme Court judgment, Imo State has domesticated this law in, I think, 2012. The law has been domesticated in Imo State, and I think last year I tried using the FOI letter to request for information from I wouldn't know if it's okay to mention the name of the institution. So I requested for this information from them, and so I work with budget, and in budget we go around tracking government projects. It could be in a community, it could be a health center, it could be a borehole, it could be maybe in a university, a structure that is being built there. So I went to an institution to ask for, okay, this is what we have in the budget. We want to see how far this budget has gone. So the security there told me, okay, you don't just come and get this information. You have to write through the head of the institution, which I did. And I can tell you 2 months later, I didn't get any information. I didn't get any feedback from this institution. So I mean, it's quite even us as an organization, a budget. So last year budget, we made over 1,400 FOI requests to some MDAs, and only 8 of them responded to our request. 8 out of 1,400. So you see, the figure is really terrible, and I wish we could do so much advocacy for the full implementation of this FOI law.
So the request that budget made, was it 1,000 in the whole country or just in Imo State?
No, in the whole country. In the whole country, yes.
Okay, well, this is really crazy. This is really crazy and even annoying to hear. Mohammed, you probably have plenty of experiences like Chimeze on this request. Share just one experience. Have you made requests, and what was your experience?
I have a lot of negative experiences. However, I would just want to go to the positive experience just to show the listeners that it actually works. So I've had a life, especially between 2019 till 2022, which almost every week we're putting in one FOI or the other. And sincerely, we've seen a lot of responses. For example, I did a project regarding tertiary institutions, working with almost 50 tertiary institutions of the federal government, majorly tracking TED fund interventions. And we've seen a lot of successes, and I could say almost success rate of almost 60 or 70% compliance. And part of the key thing I would say is perhaps because we're working with tertiary institutions, which are mostly, we can tag them as the learned. So, and you really see them respond to that. But conversation around response is actually at times part of the challenge is they don't even have the information in a publicly accessible format. So if you even ask them, they'll have to now start putting it up together for them to even make it in a public accessible format. But sincerely, a lot of responses are there. I agree that a lot needs to be done.
Which states are you getting these responses from? Are you getting them from Abuja or from particular states? Because Chimeze has said here that they put in about 1,000 plus and they got only 8 responses. So that's really is conflicting with what you're saying. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's this thing is location based, or what? Why do you work and why are you getting these positive responses?
We actually worked across the country in all the geopolitical zones, at least five tertiary institutions in all of the political zones. For example, I remember UNIZIC was very responsive, Insuka was very responsive, University of Port Harcourt was very, very responsive. We also had, for example, across all the zones. But as earlier mentioned, perhaps, just a hypothesis, perhaps the response was because we were working more with a learned institution, perhaps like their tertiary institutions, just a hypothesis. But at the same time, the other experiences that I've had, we've also sent a lot of even Federal Ministry of Justice itself, which is supposed to be the regulator of the act itself, where it takes them. Of course, for them, there was response, but it was not a positive response. And we had a thought of either going to court, but then we felt it's just really not that very key necessary. And then we let it. But it happens, it works. A lot of things needs to be done to make it better, but it happens and it works.
Okay, thank you so much. Chimeze, in all these cases, have you ever made an attempt to compel the ministries to, like, for example, when you are turned down, what do you do next? Are there instances, Chimeze, coming here, because especially you have had some negative responses. So when you don't get this information, what do you do? What does the law, what respite do you have within the law, Chimeze?
All right, so the law states that that you have 7 days to get responses from these institutions, and in fact, even state offense. So now, section 5, subsection. No, sorry, let me get that right. Section 7, subsection 5 of the FOI law. It says, where a case of a wrongful denial of access is established, the defaulting officer or institution commit an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of 500,000 naira. So if an officer or an institution denies you access to a particular information, they are liable to pay a fine of 500,000 naira. Also, Section 10, subsection 1. So, sorry, Section 10 also says it is a criminal offense punishable on conviction by the court with a minimum of 1 year imprisonment for any officer or head of government or public institution to which this act applies to willfully destroy any record kept in his custody or attempts to capture or otherwise alter same before they are released to any person. So they are offenses, right? So personally, for me as an individual, right? I mean, when I write for this FOI request and I don't get responses, I don't take it. I don't proceed to court. Probably I don't have the finances. But at our organization, as an organizational level, when we write some of these requests and they don't respond, I think we have to write and write again. So, because if you consider the financial cost of going to court, and also some of them might even give you an excuse, right? So also in the law also made exemption for institutions who probably the information you're asking them, they don't have it. When you ask them, they will refer you to a higher authority. Okay, go to a federal ministry, go to this part. So if you consider maybe the financial costs, the logistical costs, I mean, we are in Nigeria, and you know the cost of, I mean, going to law, hiring a lawyer and everything. So for me as an individual, I've not, after my FOI request, we are not granted, I didn't proceed to court. That's a personal experience.
Oh, your organization, has the organization tested this FOI law in court? Ruth, Mohammed, Chimeze, who amongst you have you ever, or your organization, have you protested this FOI law in court? And can anybody share his experience, just so we understand whether this is something that is even working? Has anybody tested this in court, or do you know any organization that has tested this in court?
Ruth, do you want to go first, or I can?
You can go. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to mention that before now, I remember that Connected Development, that's my former organization, alongside CERAP, we had worked on a joint FOI letter to the Office of the Auditor Generals. That was during the COVID-19, and there was a lot of back and forth. But the truth is, we didn't go to court at that point in time. But eventually, the Auditor General did release the details that we requested for, and that's closed out. But I remember that CERAP has taken I'm trying to remember the agency that they took to court and actually won, and requesting for it was around 700 billion expenditure, which CERAP took them to court for, and even went down to ECOWAS, but I believe they won that case.
Okay. So the court compelled the agency to release the information, right? And probably punish defaulting people. Okay, thank you so much. Mohammed, can you share your experience? Have you tested this in court, or you know any company, any organization, or anybody that has tested this in court?
So while I was at PPDC, we actually got almost 5 judgments, which the court have compelled various agencies, including NERC, including Federal Ministry of Power, including Federal Ministry of Finance, including the Bureau of Public Procurement, to disclose some relevant information, which they have. And we even, at some of the judgment, for example, the judgment for NERC, the court even gave us 500,000, which NERC have paid the 500,000.
Fantastic.
Yes, and they have actually paid the 500,000.
So how long did it take you to get the judgment?
It took a year. Part of the thing that we did, for example, so let me even just share this experience. Perhaps other participants could learn from it. Our first 4 cases, we usually just file in an abridgment of the FOI itself, which usually takes time. Our first judgments usually took 3 years. I think there's one for 3 years. There's even one for 5 years. But when we went for the NERC, what we first did was we filed in a violation of fundamental human rights. We filed in fundamental human rights. So it was more of like a speedy trial. And then we're able, from there, the judge felt, okay, we can move into full trial. And then in full trial, we already have all the cases. And then NRC already knew that they have no way to go. So they just agreed. And within a year, we were able to get our own judgment and then it moved forward. And presently, we were actually part of the key sponsors of this recent Supreme Court judgment that we just have the judgment, which is a very landmark judgment. I remember it has been in existence for a very long time, I think as far back as 2014. So they were at the High Court, they went to Appeal Court, and now with the Supreme Court judgment. So we actually have tested, and sincerely for me, in a way, having been in this space for quite a small time, perhaps we just have to challenge these systems with the legality of it. Or else the more we complain, there's that feeling from the government that nothing will happen. That guts, that impunity that nothing will happen. And that's why they just continue to deny the information, and because they just feel like we can't do anything. But,
okay, so thank you so much here, but does the law require the judiciary system to give judgment within a particular period of time? Is there any period of time that the law itself requires the judiciary to give? Because if you need information to do something in 3 months and you're going to get judgment in the next 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, that doesn't make sense. I mean, you're just going to court for the sake of going to court because you need the information. So what is the margin of time allowed for the judiciary to give judgment?
I am really not aware of any specific time. I don't know if other people here are aware of that, but I'm sure that the law, especially Section 20-something, gave that there's a room for judicial review, where we can always have a judicial review to ensure whether the merit of the application or otherwise. But I'm not really sure about that.
So anybody here knows what period of time the law, because it's just Ruth, do you know?
Well, the law was not specific to the timeline at which it would be in the court. What it did mention is that judicial review, or as to a timeline as to when the court would deliver its proceeds and then eventually give a judgment, that wasn't specific. Probably these are things that should be part of this review.
Thank you so much. I think we have had a very fantastic conversation. I actually have learned a lot myself, even though I read this Freedom of Information law before this meeting, and I've read it in the past, but I think this conversation has really, given me a lot more insights around it, especially with the experiences that all of you have shared. And that's been really very fantastic. But what are the challenges? I know that in the course of our conversation, we have all talked about the challenges we are faced, whether it's going to court, whether not having money to go to court, and and all that stuff. So what are the challenges you guys see with this law, and how can we avoid these challenges? I would like us to be as brief as possible. Chimeze, if you have 1 or 2 challenges, your experiences and from what you hear from people, what are the challenges? And first of all, before we even say challenges, what have been the impact of this? Do you think that this law has made any change, has helped with transparency, accountability, good governance? Do you think that, there's something to say, at least this law has contributed positively to the way we do business in government in this country? And if you can do so in 1 minute, Chimeze, I would appreciate that. And if you have your instances or experiences to share around it to say, yeah, there is some merit to it and there's something good that has come out of it, that'll be fine.
All right, so yes, so I would definitely agree that the law has had positive impacts. And like we mentioned before, it was not easy to assess government budgets, and not just government specifics of government budget. So for us at budget, we've assessed in our website in govspend.ng, you could see the contractor that has been paid for a particular project, what amount was paid to him, what particular dates the money was made, the contract, the order ID, So on our website on govspend.ng, you could actually find this information there. And this was made possible because this Freedom of Information Act was passed since 2011, right? So in terms of the challenges, I think most government institutions their staff don't really understand this law, right? And even the law makes it that every government institution should set up an FOI desk officer who speedily respond to this request, right? But then most of these institutions don't have an FOI officer. And so that's why, even like Mohammed mentioned, we as NGOs, as CSOs, we try to even do trainings for them, train and retrain. There's a law on this, and we need to get these people to start doing it. So the challenge has been basically that these people, even people that work for this government, they don't understand this law and how it works. And just like we mentioned, the financial cost, right? The law didn't really, if the law can provide a means where people can seek legal redress, probably free of charge, right? I think that would help people to speedily go to court. But then if you consider the cost of going to hire a lawyer and everything, or maybe it would, some person might want to sit back and not take through that process. So if the law could make it easy that people could access free legal services that would afford them going to court to challenge any MDA that refuses them any information, I think that would be a good thing. And having FOI desk officers who know about FOI and respond to FOI.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. What have you to say here? What you seem to have sufficient experience with all these. What are the positive things you see, and what challenges do you see, and how can we surmount this?
Sincerely, I have seen a lot of success. I've seen communities where, thanks to FOI, schools were built, healthcare facilities were built, drugs were provided, people were able to access schools in quantum of number, in impact at scale. So sincerely, I could give credit to this. And we've also seen it actually served as a tool for also more greater things as regards to improving transparency, accountability, and even fiscal responsiveness in its whole. However, I have one of my biggest challenges, sincerely, and I would just want to deviate a little bit here away from the government now to the citizens, is as the more you, so sincerely, people don't trust the government. And then that's why you can do 1,000 trainings on FOI telling communities that they have the right to request for this information, but they just listen because they just don't trust that when they write in the letter, they're going to get the response. And we all should not blame them. All understand how the country, unfortunately, has failed in several instances, despite a lot of optimism. However, what I really would want to see is more of a different mindset, that mindset that we're going to keep trying until we get it right. From 1,000 applications of FOI with only 6 successes, if we continue to do, hopefully one day, one time, we're able to have 1,000 applications with 500 responses, and then it continues to go over there. How long will it take? How resilient are Nigerian citizens and myself and everyone on the call is willing to continue on this is what I don't know. But sincerely, for me, part of the key challenge is the mindset. And if I have $1,000 million now to put in as a grant, I'll give 1,000 million naira for us to ensure that we have a better mindset where we're able to hold the government accountable. It's never easy. They will never succumb too easy. Like they will never give it to you easily. They have to succumb to pressure.
Okay, so Mohammed, you said that you have seen communities where the thanks to FOI projects were completed. How did you do that? Because I was going to ask Chimezie that, but now that you mentioned it, so even if we get the information, then what next? For example, Chimezie, you guys publish budget, publish everything. What next? The data is out, the information is out, the budget is 1 million. We gave 300 million to do this road. You have published it, and so what? So what do you do with that information? Like all the things that budget publishes every year about the budget, how is it making a difference in transparency and accountability? People can give you the numbers, give you the information, and so what? And then, so what do you do with that information? I want to understand how that is impacting, the significance of that. How is that making a change? Because gathering information is not enough. We can gather the information, publish them on their website, and the governor can tell you, yes, I got $300,000, I got 1 million, I got 5 million. So you have gotten the information. So what next? So how did getting that information help with that project you're talking about? Maybe that could be a case study of how that we can use that information to then get what we want.
So let me share just two short experiences, right? This one was in 2020, just before COVID. We got access to a data that the Kaduna state government, in a joint funding with the federal government, are building 3 number of modern skill acquisition center for people with disability. In Kaduna, one was in Kafanchan, the other one was in Suba, and then the other one was in Binangwari. And then we took the one in Suba. And the first thing we did is, the contract was already awarded. 3 years down the line, nothing was done. We picked in the data. Already on the OCDS is reporting that the project has already been completed. We took up the data. We did our initial analysis and review. We were able to get the number of the contractor, the company of the contractor, and also the agency that awarded the contract. We did follow-ups to establish what is the challenge. This work has not been done. Why are you reporting that the work has already been completed? Just that. And then we also had a call with the contractor. I remember I was the person that called the contractor, and when I called him, he sounded like a big man, and of course he was. And I told him that I'm actually following up regarding a renovation, a building of modern skill acquisition center for people with disability in Suba, which was awarded at 10 billion as at then. He was like, okay, but I said it was reported that the work has already been completed. What he told me was they only gave him mobilization fee of 400 million, but the work has not been completed, and he has not even mobilized to site. Then we went back to the ministry, but why are you reporting that this work has already been done? With that, we facilitated the pressure from him. And with him, I remember we also had to send him an email to say, you already have 400 for mobilization, but nothing was done. And then he said he just felt like the government was not serious and they were not going to release the other funds. And with that pressure from 2 angles, we saw him mobilize the site, we saw him clear site, and we saw him started building. I can assure you, just last year, that school has already been completed and people have already been enrolled in that school. That is one. And let me tell you.
Was the project completed with the 400 million or with the what happened to the, because when they say the project has been completed for the 10 billion, something must have happened to the money for that 10 billion. Did you do that, or was you pressured the government to release additional money to complete the project?
Yes. So what happened then was they said they only budgeted the funds, but they have not released the fund to the contractor. And it was because the contractor has not mobilized to site.
Okay.
So what we did then, we pushed the contractor to mobilize to site, and he was able to get a lot of his review and was able to have completed the project. In fact, it has even been furnished, even admission was even done. In fact, I know a lot of people, I think 3 or 4, who have been enrolled in that facility. As a success. Let me give another case study. And this one is not just the end of it, but look at the dynamics of the 2 stories. The other one is actually renovation of a public library for 90 million. The person have already been mobilized. Of course, he was a politically exposed person, so he's a PEP. He was already mobilized, almost 70% of the funds to do the job. But he did not mobilize the site. He also did not do the job. When we went in with the pressure, unfortunately, it's an unintended consequence. They have already fell out with the governor as at then. When we took our advocacy to say, why has this work not been completed? Over 2 years with the work. It then flagged up to say, so why is he holding our money and he has not completed on the job? At the very end, I was very young then. I will not have done it the same way. But when at the end, we got to ensure that the contract was cancelled. The money, his company was blacklisted. Unfortunately, the motive could be whatever it is. Perhaps it's because they fell out with the governor. I don't know. But at least for that instance, he has done a crime which was in contravention with the PPA law of 2016. So his company was blacklisted. He was asked to refund the money. In fact, they had to go to court for that. Unfortunately, up to now, the project has not been done.
The money has not been refunded.
Yes, the money has not been refunded because they're still in court. The project has still not been done. If it's now, perhaps I will have just tried to put more pressure to ensure that he's able to mobilize society so that the project can happen, or the project is going to be awarded to another person. The work has still not been done. The money has still not been paid. Perhaps our pressure will have made him to come and do the work. But to see, at least the FOI, at least.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Ruth, you had already shared your experiences where your organization either collaborated with another organization to go to court and get judgment. Do you have any further experiences to share about the sources of this and the challenges you have faced? I think Mohammed is having network issues. Ruth, are you still here with us? Are you done?
I think my network is shaky, but I'll just quickly share. One brief challenge. I feel like we've mentioned a lot of the challenges, so I will just buttress a little bit. One major challenge I know is the delay in response. I remember my organization sending out an FOI to aviation as regards to the last, as regards to the fund that was spent on aviation. We wanted to know what was that money spent on, the complete breakdown as to the huge amount of money, and then there were no Nigerian Airways or whatever that name was supposed to be. The truth is, they received that letter and eventually responded, but their response was for us to give them an additional 7 days. We knew they were buying time, but after that, they just went quiet because they wanted to evaluate, oh, will these people follow up with a court injunction or not? Because my organization does not conduct litigation or go ahead to take organizations to court. But what we would do is go on social media to ensure that everybody tags them and follow up with the information. And it's interesting to know that some of those details were provided, but what we requested for was not given. And we didn't follow through because that would require us going to court. Okay. Then that aside, a big win for us is the aspect of citizens getting aware and journalists, media personnel utilizing this information effectively. I know that I had conducted a campaign in Kebbi State, in I think that was sorry, trying to remember the name of the community, to be very specific. In a local government in Kebbi State, that was Fake local government, and the community members were surprised to see that government would attend to the needs that we called them for. And eventually, after that campaign, some of them reached out to me personally because they wanted to test the FOI. And I told them that for the FOI to be very effective as citizens, you must come together as a coalition. And that was something that they tested, and it worked for them in that local government, because at that point in time, the local government had housing that was supposed to be for local indigenes, but the housings were being sold to other people. And this coalition, young youths came together as a coalition and requested for the details of the sales of those housing, and they got information. They even were invited for a sit-down engagement with the local government. So this brings both the good, the bad, and the ugly. The truth is, we must keep testing this act for us to know that it's effective, and agencies must also be aware that there are certain agencies that you go to and they are scared to release information because to them, their principal is the state. But with the current Supreme Court judgment, this information needs to get to the grassroots, get to MDA workers, get to local government personnel, let them know that this law exists for the benefit of the citizens at large. So I think that would be my view.
Thank you so much, person. Thank you. Well, I think we have come to the end of this conversation, and I think it has been quite enriching. I think we should do this again and more often, because I think people have learned quite a lot. Want to thank the speakers, Chimeze Bose from Budget, and all the experiences you have shared. I want to thank Mohammed Kasim for the insights, and want to also thank Ruth. I think we have had a very robust conversation. I think this shouldn't be the last one. I think we should pursue these things even more. I'm very fascinated about what Kasim is doing in his organization and the part of work, the part of the world, Nigeria, where he is working, and all of you, the work that you guys are doing over there. I think one of the things I would like you guys to look into, and probably Kasim, with your organization, since your organization co-sponsored, the case that eventually led to the Supreme Court judgment that we have, is to be able to, figure out how long the court, needs to give judgment. All over the world, there are laws that if you file a case, every case you file, there is a time limit given by law that the judge, the judiciary must give judgment. That is it. Most cases in the United States, some of them 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. So if we don't have that, we're going to always have a problem. And I feel like advocacy should channel towards that, because if we can get expedited judicial judgment, forget about the cost. People will pay the lawyers and go to court. But if you go to court and it's going to take 5 years before you get judgment on the matter, what's the point? And that's why they always ask us to go to court, because they know that the court is going to be forever. You're going to get tired. You're going to get overwhelmed. Yeah. Some of you may even japa before the judgment is given. So what's the point? So I think what I want us, and we can talk about this more, and maybe you have not thought about it, is to how can we compel the judiciary to give judgment on this as soon as possible. Let's say maybe like the law can say the government must, any case that goes to court, any FOI case, if you go and you're denied and you go to court, the court must give judgment within 90 days. And I don't think that the FOI things are things that we should be appealing and appealing and appealing. In most countries of the world, there are some issues that once the immediate court, there's a court specifically for these rules on it, that is final. So if you guys can then channel your energy towards that, that could work, because no matter how bad Nigeria is, I think there's still a little bit of compliance to some of the court rulings. They don't comply to all of them, but at least people can then at least say, oh, the court has said you should do this. And there are penalties that could follow. So I know somebody has his hand up, Bridget Chioma. I don't know whether you have a question or you have something to say. Please go ahead, Bridget. Bridget, please go ahead. Igwe Bridget Chioma, you have your hand up. Unmute yourself. Okay, Bridget, go ahead.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
There's this particular question you asked, but I couldn't get the answer.
Okay, so what was the question?
You said, what is the impact of FOI? Like, has it contributed positively to how we do business in Nigeria? But I couldn't get the answer because of my network.
Yeah, some of the speakers have explained how the FOI law has contributed to making change. Mohammed explained how projects in his community, some projects that they worked on through the FOI were completed because of that. He has also explained how when he got the information, they got contractors to complete the project and all that stuff. So yes. And also Chimeze explained the work that you now have the publication of the budget and everything is all thanks to FOI. And then also Ruth also explained how the judgment they got and the project that she did in the north in KB or so through the FOI yielded more results. So showing that it is working, and then which means we should take more advantage of the FOI to facilitate good governance. Okay, thank you so much. Somebody else has his hand. Emmanuel Boala. Emmanuel, please
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mohammed. We worked with Mohammed, so I know his work. You can imagine you work with him in Adamawa. One other ways that I think we can also try to look at these challenges and try to address it, because more often than not, it is the chief executives that are because government officials will tell you that when I give information before you know it, the chief executive is already aware and has become a target. So I think one area that we together can, or collectively can work around it, is trying to ensure that even the chief executives are aware of what is obtainable in the FOI Act, so that they are aware of it very well. And then other executives, again, many commissioners, probably ministers, commissioners, and permanent secretaries, are also aware of all that is in the FOI Act, so that it is no longer going to be a thing that they will say we are not aware. They are aware, even including the sanctions, so that they can get information across to the responsible organization that requests for those information. I want to also say that based on the discussion so far, having seen probably some of the challenges that the FOI Act implementation has gone through right from the time it was passed, I think probably if we are looking at maybe reviewing it, that is when we will now also include those other aspects. Okay, the number of months that when it goes to court, that the number of months that it will take, so that it doesn't exceed that month, it should clearly be stated inside the bill, that everybody will know that this is exactly what is there. The law will clearly specify it and strengthen it, so that everybody will understand and see how it goes. We go about it, so that it reduces the length of time that we use when we go to court. Else, by the time you take 3 years looking for information that you want to write, you want to do one or two things with it, it doesn't actually add up to what somebody will want to even go and start talking about. That is probably what discourages a lot of people. So that is my submission. Thank you.
So I do appreciate your submission, and this is very good. And I think if there's something we can go on, we can get from this conversation, is that we can work together to improve on this and do more. And I'm so much in support of this. Asking our advocacy officer to reach out to the speakers here and their organizations. And one area, like I said, is making sure we get that the judiciary has a particular period of time to give judgment when we go to court. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. People are just going to say, oh, if you go to court, it's going to stay forever. And what, like you said, it could be achieved through going to a lawmaker, and the lawmaker can move a motion for that. Or it could be achieved through going to a court, and the court can then give a ruling that, this number of years or months it has to stay. We need to be able, for me, that's a problem, not just with the freedom of information law, but with so many things we do in the, because we go to court, it stays for 10 years, 20 years. We should be able to force the judiciary to give ruling within if the law has said, if the FOI law says within 7 days, then the judiciary should be able to give us judgment as soon as we can, as soon as we need it, so that we can use it to achieve whatever we want. And yes, the chief executives. And the thing is that one of the biggest problems we have, and I think Mohammed was right, was that information, people don't have information about these things. The law says there should be FOI officer in every government agency. Do we have those things? So that's an area where I can also begin to do advocacy, can work together, and to ensure that every government office has the FOI desk officer, and the FOI desk officer knows what he's supposed to do or she's supposed to do by law. That is not impossible, but you see, we have to have people come together and start pushing this. And even if it's just in the state where you are, if we push this, and then we have many FOI desk officers in many government parastatals, I think things will now begin to be, because they themselves would then be the ones that will be making sure that every information that people need, they are put together. Sometimes maybe it's not bad, really. It's just that we don't have good leaders who know what they should do. Everybody's just coming and going, and there's no other organization. So, but those of us who understand this can also find a way to come in and help, put them together. Ladies and gentlemen, I think
I didn't lower my hand because I also wanted to say that Mohammed actually knows that he worked in Adamawa also. And he also knows the procedures for the OGP in Adamawa State. So we're working through we were actually trying to see, using the access to information thematic area of the OGP under the SAP for Adamawa, we're trying to initially domesticate the FOI Act when we just had the Supreme Court ruling and we stopped it. So we're trying to see the Commissioner of Justice so that we see how we can work around it too. So we're going to consider those aspects and see how we can ensure that desk officers are appointed in the respective MDAs, because now we're working towards the ensuring that the state implement the FOI Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy with the work you guys are doing in Adamawa. Chimezie in Imo State there, I'm proud of the work you're doing. Maybe you can reach out to Muhammad and Emmanuel, and together you guys can also do what in Imo State, what they are doing in Adamawa and else and Kano. And one state after another, we'll get around, and then and we'll have a better country. Thank you so much. And I thank our team at CSAAE, our advocacy officer, Blessing Erika, for putting this together, our communications team, Modestus, Michael and his team, and I'll thank our chief operating officer, Francisco, who's been in this meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope to continue this conversation. Somebody has even recommended that we should be doing this every month. So it's been an interesting conversation, and I think we should be able to do more in the future and not just have meetings and conversations, but come together as organizations to see how we can bring the change in this fair. Thank you so much, and God bless you all. Bye.
Okay, thank you so much, Father. Okay, so Emmanuel, I'm dropping the number, a WhatsApp number on the chat box. Okay, so all you just have to do is chat up this WhatsApp line. Then I will link you with all the speakers, both Ruth and Chimezie. Then maybe, and Mohammed already, so we can maybe start up something or thereabout. So let me.